So which responsibilities is there like stuff on the
God, I've always wanted to do that.
Except for you wanted to say guilty.
Good evening. Mayor Bassett is out of town, so I am chairing the meeting tonight. For those of you who have decided to watch us rather than the Final Four, I truly appreciate that. For those who tuned in thinking they were getting the Final Four, you're on the wrong station. Before we start, Rich had a couple of things he wanted to cover for the benefit of the council.
Maybe do roll call first.
Oh, roll call first. Yes, Ally, roll call first.
Councilmember Debbie Bertlin. Councilmember Jane Brom.
Here.
Councilmember Mike Ciro.
Here.
Councilmember Mike Grady. Councilmember Tana Sen. Here. Mayor Bruce Bassett. Acting Mayor Dan Grouse.
Here. So let me turn it over to our city manager.
Thank you. I know the council from time to time likes to take pause to acknowledge achievements by some of the staff, so I wanted to do exactly that. Over the years, I've encouraged our department directors to get involved in their careers and their professions, because I think it brings leadership to the city. It brings new ideas. It brings prestige, and hopefully that translates into some amount of actually influence around the state. In the past, we've had the Parks Director be the director of the Washington Recreation and Parks Association. We've had our city clerk be the president of her association among the city clerks. I've done around with the board and the presidency of the City Managers Association, and we've had others. Today, our police chief, Chief Holmes, was installed as the president of the Washington Sheriffs and Police Chiefs Association. So we have the chief cop here for the next year, and very proud of Ed for that distinction. To get there, you have to be known and identified as a leader among your peers, and then ultimately be put on a ballot and voted for. So that's a good thing, and Ed will be asked throughout next year, it has actually in the last year, to participate at the statewide level, particularly in the legislature, on law enforcement issues that affect the sheriffs and police chiefs around the state. So congratulations, Ed. And then secondly, it's not quite an acknowledgement as much as just I'll let you know, a heads up. As you know, Katie has had some challenges recently on the health front in her family, and I think she should report there's some good news since the last time I brought it up with you, but there's also ongoing challenges. So, and she, of course, is stepping up to those in her family to try and help. I wouldn't expect anything less. But in doing that, Katie's going to take a 2-month leave, family leave, to care for her mother. And tonight, literally, her last city thing until about the 1st of June. So we have her former boss from the law firm of Ogden Murphy Wallace, an attorney named Scott Snyder, who will be serving as our city attorney for the next 2 months. And Katie, maybe you can speak to both your 2 months and then maybe a little bit about Scott.
Scott was my very first boss when I became an attorney, so you have him to blame for everything, but you'll enjoy him. Ogden Murphy Wallace has been in practice well over 55 years. Scott was the city attorney for the city of Edmonds for years and years. He's been practicing in excess of 30 years. I don't even want to guess how long. Very funny, very well learned, and well respected in the city attorney organizations. You'll enjoy him. And I will miss you all, but I appreciate all your support, and we'll see you in a couple months.
Scott will have regular office hours 1 day a week, and then as needed, and I'm going to try and be a bit of the sort of the triage person so that he's billing on hourly rates, so we're going to try and be as efficient as we can in getting legal advice, which is a little bit different than having in-house counsel. Scott will be attending your city council meetings, each one of them, and he will be attending our department director meetings every other week just to stay abreast of issues.
Thanks very much, and obviously, Katie, we wish you and your mother only the best in the next 2 months, and look forward to getting you back here as soon as possible.
Great. Thank you.
So next on our agenda is appearances. Standard rules apply. Please, if this is a time for anyone to speak to the council on any issue, whether it's on the agenda or not on the agenda, you have 3 minutes. Please, if you do want to speak, state your name and your address. And this would apply to any item on the agenda.
Good evening. Many of you know me. I'm Mark Clausen. I live at 6107 Southeast 32nd Street. And I am here tonight because you have on the agenda the best practices materials that you've seen, and I sent an email last week giving a little bit of background. A little bit more background on it. The committee consisted of a half dozen people, and there are 3 other committee members who are here tonight I'd like to recognize. Bob Olson, Cliff Churls, and Jim Stanton all spent a lot of time, along with Lucia, who I'm sure all of you know, and James Mason. And so what you're seeing tonight is the product of what the committee worked on. A little bit on the mechanics of how the materials came to be. We had a meeting a year ago where anybody in the community who was interested could attend, and we put up posters, and we had a fairly good attendance and a good mix of people who were interested in pedestrian issues and motorist issues and cyclist issues. And Chris Kelsey was a facilitator, and she basically ran the meeting as how can these other groups that you're concerned about, how can they make your travel safer and better? And there were a lot of things that were predicted. You know, cyclists don't ride in huge packs. There were other things that we didn't even think about, which is one of the motorist-centric people said, you know, it really bothers me when pedestrians wear dark colors at night. Well, yeah, you know, I didn't think about that, but that's a great thing that a lot of people, when they're pedestrians, they think, well, we're pedestrians, we're not moving very fast, we don't need to be seen, and yet it's very hard to see them. So she went through and wrote down this whole list, and then we got back together as a committee, and we basically looked at what applies to Mercer Island, what are kind of the unique issues and the common problems that we saw on Mercer Island, and then we circulated that to everyone who was at the meeting, and we went over item by item, what made sense, what was necessary, what was not. There was no intent to cover the field. Really, it was something that was very Mercer Island centric, based on, you know, what issues do we have on the Mercers and what issues do we have with a large population of students and younger people. So that's kind of a little bit more background on how we got to the place where you're seeing the materials that you're looking at now. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mark, and thanks to the entire committee for all your work on this. It's always fantastic when we get groups of citizens who are willing to spend their time on a very important civic initiative. Anybody else?
Ira Appleman, 6213, 83rd Place, Southeast. I think you're doing a little better than you were before, but with this bicycle stuff, with the bicyclists, motorists, and pedestrians. I think I understand the proclamation better, but I really don't understand the resolution. The policy for Mercer Island's best roads attached here to as attachment A and incorporated herein by this reference, as if set forth in full, is hereby adopted as official policy for the list of practices reflecting voluntary commitments. I don't know what any of that means, so I hope in your discussion you'll explain what that means, because I think it's completely confusing. I don't really think this list is going to matter. What we really need is to work with the Department of Motor Vehicles to develop a culture for what you do when you come up behind a bicyclist. What exactly do you do? And I'm not sure, I don't really have any trouble with bicyclists out there, because normally they'll move to the side, and I really haven't had any problem with them. Some people have. But I think we need to develop some sort of rules and culture for what to do when you're in a car and somebody's in a bike, and we don't have that. And I think it has to be trained. I don't think a list like this is going to make any difference. So, and, you know, lots of things. Wear a helmet. Come on. I mean, we already know that. And most cyclists do, but some don't. I mean, cyclists don't stop at stop signs, and they do really bizarre things like become pedestrians. When they stop, they suddenly turn left and go through the crosswalk, and they do all sorts of things. So I think that we're going to have to work with some organization like the Department of Motor Vehicles and come up with, as a driver, what are you supposed to do when there's a bicyclist? I don't recall, I certainly didn't get that in driver's training, what you do when there's a bicyclist there. Obviously, you don't run them down, but just exactly how do you communicate with them, and they don't know how to communicate. And I think one of the problems is that, at least in my observation, cyclists don't follow any rules whatsoever. I mean, they don't stop for stop signs. A large percentage don't stop for stop signs. We could make a whole lot of money and work on the budget if we just gave them tickets for every time they just ran through the stop sign. And so somehow cyclists need to be controlled also in terms of licensing in order to deal with the problems that we see. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to address the council? So if not, I'll close appearances. Go on to the minutes. First, for the minutes of the meeting of March 5th, 2012. Ally has made a couple of changes in this, reflecting our discussion at the last meeting. Can I get a motion to approve, unless anyone has further concerns?
I move to approve the minutes of March 5th, 2012.
Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carries 5-0. Next are the minutes of March 19th. There is one typo on that. On page 3, under AB 4711, the last motion was actually made by me and not by Mike Grady, particularly since he voted against the motion. With that change, if I can have a motion to approve the minutes as I just amended them.
So moved to approve the minutes of March 19th as amended.
Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Consent calendar. All we have are payables and payroll. If there are no questions, can I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Motion's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. First item on the regular business, AB 4723, and Glenn, you're going to be giving the presentation on this?
Thank you. Good evening. I'm going to be introducing the agenda bill. This agenda bill covers the materials that Mark Clausen described in his appearance before you. The agenda bill provides for your consideration a proclamation that encourages courteous and safe use of the island's roads and streets by all users. It also includes a resolution that would adopt a policy laying out Mercer Island's best road safety practices. These practices, it should be noted, are voluntary commitments, do not add to existing laws or regulations. This proclamation and resolution are the products of the dialogue that began a little more than a year ago, as Mark described for you. So with that.
Okay, so as the agenda bill indicates, we have both a proclamation and a resolution. We'll take them up separately. First, are there any questions of staff on either the proclamation or resolution?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to approve resolution number 1452, approving and endorsing Mercer Island best road safety practices.
Second.
Motion's been moved and seconded. Any comments?
Will we be doing this separate from the proclamation, or are they two distinct?
There is no...
One requires a vote, the other one doesn't. Is Mike right?
Right, and what I would do after we've approved the resolution is then I would read the proclamation into... I realize that's not the order in the agenda bill, but that's what I prefer doing. So I want to understand where we are in the resolution first. Go ahead, Tana.
I was just going to ask, when people get their driver's license, is there a way, does the city get informed of that, and is there a way to automatically share these best practices with new drivers in particular?
Well, I'm looking at Ed, and he's shaking his head. That's what I would have said. We really have no role in the driver's licensing process. It really is a relationship directly between citizen and the state. If we're going to try and communicate these, and I think that's the thrust of your question, we'd have to find some sort of local means to communicate it.
And I think in answer to the public comment that was made during appearances, there's no question these are worthless as just a piece of paper. And I think that, though, before you can develop a culture, you have to decide what that culture is going to be. And what the committee has done is come up with a document which can start the discussion going and the communication effort moving forward. I think it's a fair point and for the city manager to take under advisement as to how best he and his staff will communicate these to the necessary parties within the city and make sure that this continues beyond this point. And I'm sure that's, I don't know, Rich, what your thinking is on next steps on this.
Yeah, I was hoping somebody would nudge the city manager to come back at your June planning session with some ideas on what a next step in continuing the conversation and the dialogue would be. We need to sit down with some of the users and the people that were interested in getting it to this point on how can we keep the conversation going. This is more about messaging and getting behavioral changes, not unlike what CTC is trying to do in Youth and Family Services about underage drinking. This is about getting fundamental change in the way people relate to each other. And we need to do more talking and more thinking. Hopefully we just won't drop it here. So that's what I was hoping you guys would nudge me to do.
Consider yourself duly nudged.
Good, it feels good.
Nudge.
And on that note, I think if we can be real clear and continue that dialogue between now and June to reach out to the people who came to our meetings and who communicated with us so clearly, mainly the motorists, I would say, and some of the bicyclists over the recent parking ordinances. If we can continue to communicate with them between now and then to keep them engaged, to ensure that they participate in that as well. That would be great.
Absolutely.
And as I understand this, this is, whatever we adopt here tonight will be communicated to Cascade Bicycle Club and as well as any other bicycle groups that are regularly patronize the island as a first start. And also, I would hope that since the public really doesn't have an idea of what we're talking about on these best practices, that we would get this on the website relatively quickly, even in advance of the June planning session.
Sure.
And I think there's great opportunity for getting the word out at some of the big public events. Leap for Green, Summer Celebration, it should all be out there. Handouts and posters and all sorts of publicity methods. Working not only with Neighbors in Motion, but any cyclist group or any outdoor group. The Wednesday Walkers, Fran Call's group of walkers and soulmates, all sorts of
Did a
groups.
little biplane with a trailer behind it, blimps. Yeah.
That's right.
No, as well as also, I think it needs to get out to the school district.
Safe routes to school
It's
program.
extremely important that the school district we work with the school district to figure out how this can be communicated to students in the system. It starts there for sure, and sometimes students are the best teachers for their parents when it comes to things like this. Tana, you have another comment?
I was going to talk about safe routes to school.
Are there any other comments? Okay, so the motion is to approve the resolution. It's resolution number 1452. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Resolution carries 5-0. On that note, also, let me read this proclamation. Whereas with the encouragement of the City Council, a group of Mercer Island citizens called Neighbors in Motion convened a road safety forum on April 26, 2011 to promote a discussion of safety and the sharing of Mercer Island roads, streets, and trails. Whereas Neighbors in Motion members and members of the general public attending the forum exchanged views and identified safe practices for Mercer Island streets and roads. Whereas Neighbors in Motion prepared lists of best practices to promote transportation safety among motorists, pedestrians, and cyclists. Whereas the City Council agrees with the objective of promoting safe transportation by all users and encourages all users to respectfully share the island's roads and trails. Whereas in support of these objectives, the City has committed and will continue to commit resources to encourage the safe use of Mercer Island roads and trails and to expand partnership to promote safety with the media, businesses, educators, and the regional cycling community. Now, therefore, the City Council of the City of Mercer Island hereby commends Neighbors in Motion for their work and proclaims that all motorists, pedestrians, and cyclists are encouraged to be courteous and safe as they use Mercer Island's roads, streets, and trails. Signed this second day of April 2012. So with that, I do want to thank all four of you and your co-committee members for all the work you did on this. As I said before, it really is some of our best initiatives. In fact, almost all of our best initiatives start with citizen efforts and the type of work that you have done to make this possible. This is the first step only. We realize that, and it's now back to us to come up with a plan. What I would hope you would do is keep your group together, because whatever the city manager comes up with, I'm sure it's going to involve a citizen component, and that will require your ongoing involvement. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And you are welcome to stick around if you'd like.
Remember, you can watch it on Channel 21 when you get home.
Yeah. And it reruns twice a day. Okay. Our next agenda item is Agenda Bill 4721, Arts Council Annual Report and Work Plan.
Hello. Amber Britton, Staff Liaison to the Arts Council. And the Arts Council, we're just here to present to you their annual report, a review of all of their work and hard effort for the year, as well as get their 2012 work plan approved. So I have Christine Lewis, who's the current Arts Council Chair, to do a little bit of talking about our annual review or annual report.
Hi, this is only my second time visiting you guys, so I'm very happy to be here representing the Arts Council. We executed on our 2011 work plan, as far as I know, for half the year because I joined about halfway through the year. We began with the installation of the banners in the downtown corridor, which were part of our 1% programming. We also continued ongoing programming like Mostly Music in the Park and Shakespeare in the Park, and continue to receive really wonderful feedback from the community on both of those programs, and they have a lot of support from businesses and organizations around the island as well. We continued to expand our literacy program in conjunction with Aljoya, and that involved quite a long documentary film series, which is ongoing and receives great attendance. We grew sales at the indoor gallery, restored several, or repaired, I guess you could say, several pieces of our public art collection. And we closed the year with the very exciting purchase of the space art and the Giselle Berman sculpture, and we're really close to having installation dates for those to share with you. So, do you have any questions?
Do you want to also talk to us a little bit about your work plan coming up for 2012, or Amber, if you wanted to cover that, or whichever, either one of you who'd like to?
Yeah, so their work plan incorporates most of their standard programs, the Most Music in the Park, the Shakespeare, the really successful programs. You'll note one of the changes is the Third Thursday program they won't be offering for next year. And we'll still have the gallery and most of the other programs. Their budget's down a little bit. They tried to grow the Third Thursday program last year, put in a lot of effort to revamp it and try to really draw the crowds out. And we had more businesses participate. We just didn't get the crowds that they wanted, and the gal who was on the Arts Council leading those efforts was leaving, and we didn't have anybody who really wanted to step in, and they kind of felt like they were forcing it on the community and not getting a lot of response. So that is one major change that you'll see in there. But otherwise, if you have any specific questions, we're here to answer any of them. They have working committees, and they've all gotten together and decided that these are the areas of their focus for the year.
Jane, did you want to add anything?
Well, yeah, as the liaison, I've enjoyed the last year in working with the Arts Council, so I was excited to be appointed again for 2012, being the liaison. And I think this is really a hard-working group. They don't just sit back and approve policy. They are in the trenches doing the work. Contacting the bands and making the banners and being out in the crowd, collecting donations for Mostly Music in the Park, and offering refreshments at the movies at Aljoya and all sorts of things. So they really work very hard. I think it's there's been some turnover on the Arts Council, which I think it has been a challenge in a way, but it's brought an amazing new energy, I think, to the group, which I think is going to be wonderful. And there's at the last meeting, I was excited to be a part of, or an observer, I should say, of the beginning of some long-range planning for the public art.
Use of the 1%.
Use of the 1%, and looking at short-term and long-term goals for that, and doing the exercise with the green dots and the red dots and all that, and that was really good, I think. So I think there's a lot of good, exciting things happening, and when we get 2 new sculptures installed, that is going to be real exciting, I think, and there's lots more to happen, I think.
Yes, we did lose members this year, either just selling houses or having babies, all sorts of reasons. But with their departures, we got people who are really excited to be there, and so it kind of helps re-energize everybody when there's new ideas that come through the door, which is one of the reasons that we went through the plan of, here's this 1% for art funds that we have and the potentials that it can be used for, and kind of getting everybody's brainstorming, because we've had people who have been on there for many, many years and people who have been on there for just a month or two. So.
I just noted the over 1,200 volunteer hours, which I just wanted to commend the council and the community for providing those volunteer hours. It's very commendable, and I want to thank everybody for that. I also wanted to note on the banners, I imagine those are going to be happening again, since those are existing banners, and would love to maybe broaden the look at the banners as a looking at Town Center and how we can maybe augment that program or look at that a little bit more on a broad-based way, so that there might be other ways or other ones that we want to add or come up with a whole calendar, and that maybe that's a kind of an arts council combined with another, either the city council or another aspect of the community, and work together on that. So
sure,
I'm
yeah.
looking forward to it.
You'll see that quite a few of them are down right now because the poles are getting painted, so they're down, and when the poles get repainted, they'll get put up, and some other ones will get down. So for a while this spring, it's going to be a little discombobulated, but they'll be all back up and beautiful by summer. So.
Can the maybe Diane, you're more the one on the Shakespeare program. This is the one where you have to still raise money for, or Amber?
Yeah, well, most Music in the Park and Shakespeare are the programs that we try to raise funds for, and we have some grants that we apply for, and then we accept sponsorships and donations at the events.
Are there any other questions of either Amber or Christine?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple questions. Feedback on the banners. What's the feedback been on the banners?
Well, the main feedback we got, we had the designs on display at Summer Celebration, so people were able to see the paper versions and be like, oh yeah, I saw these downtown. And really overwhelming. Loved the colors, loved the brightness, thought that it cheered up the downtown. So we haven't had any negative feedback to us directly. Yeah.
Okay.
They've been really positive.
Another question kind of along what Mayor Grouse talked about is the fundraising for Music in the Park and also Shakespeare. How much money do we have? How much money do you have to raise for that?
Shakespeare in the Park is, well, I don't know how much we would say we have to raise, because we don't usually cover the costs directly. Like we have a budget for that, and then we have a certain amount that we have to raise based on our overall budget. The program itself is $6,000 a year is what the cost is, and we go after grants, but the overall budget we don't raise that much. I don't know how to best answer that, because we have a revenue budget and an expense budget, and I don't think it's broken down by that $15,000 for the overall Arts Council budget that we raise for.
But we go to the community and ask them for monies.
Sponsorships. They get their banner. I think Key Bank was a key...
for Mercer Music in the Park.
Mm-hmm. They get a banner out by the pergola for their sponsorship.
Okay. Why isn't the fireworks program more of an arts? I look at arts as entertainment, whether that's entertainment looking at statues, whether it's entertainment looking at paintings, whether it's entertainment looking at fireworks over the lake. Why isn't the arts, the fireworks program, which we did have to do a lot of fundraising, which took from the community and also took staff time, why isn't the arts program looked upon to help or to finance that art project, if you will?
Well, that's never come up in any conversations that I've heard. It's always been a part of Summer Celebration, but that performing arts is something that our general budget, we've only been able to do the Shakespeare and the Most Music in the Park. We don't have a real big performing arts budget, and that can't be used for the 1% for art funds, so I don't know where the funding would come, but we are raising $26,000 for the fireworks this year.
Amber, I could maybe jump in and add a little bit to that. The fundraising that we've done for the fireworks was last year and this year. Prior to that, it has just been funded as part of Summer Celebration,
fund, yeah.
which has city contribution. It's got other fundraising. This is sort of the big pot. For the fireworks show to be considered in some way part of the Arts Council or the Municipal Arts Funds bailiwick, the City Council would have to direct that. So I guess the answer to your question, why hasn't it been, is because the City Council never directed that.
But it's certainly within our purview to direct that.
Yes, the ordinance for the 1% for the Arts Fund is a local ordinance, so the council could do whatever it wants.
Well, that might be something for the council to consider versus, there's a nice balance here versus asking the community to pony up for the fireworks, because I know certainly the fireworks is well received by the community.
I really agree that a lot of performing arts stuff is, something that we could take on. My question would be, given the capacity of the programming that we're already doing, what kind of, I guess this is almost a question for Amber and Diane, is what kind of hours go into creating that fundraising, and what kind of capacity would the council have to take that on in terms of manpower and time, given what we're already doing and things we actually try to add, which are always a little shaky on pulling people in. So I just, that would be my question. It does sound like something that makes sense, but it would be a question of capacity from my perspective and knowing what kind of my whole team's already doing now. So I don't know.
I would guess majority of that would fall on staff as it does now. So I don't know that the Arts Council would be really tasked with, hours-wise, but I do know that they, in their planning session, have really identified goals that they have for adding new public art using that 1% for art fund. So I know that there's a balance in there right now. Part of the reason that hasn't been spent is because they've had turnover, and it's been kind of hard to get them to be able to have a concrete plan, and that's what they're working on right now, and that's a part of their 3-year plan that they're in the middle of formulating. So I think that we'll see some great public art that will come from that, hopefully using that 1% funds as we bring it to you and get it approved. So.
Yeah, I would, I think, you've got almost $300,000 in that fund, which is not an insignificant amount of money. So I would only caution you, because it's, I think that at some point, as you're moving ahead on this, before you get too invested in a solution, if it's a six-figure program, that you might want to check back with the council.
For sure.
I mean, what the last thing I'd want to see is that, with the space capsule art, that was a relatively small amount of money, and the council was happy to embrace that. I'm not saying we wouldn't embrace a larger project, but I don't want you to spend hours and hours and have your council do all this work and then find this council to be unreceptive for some reason.
I could kind of maybe share with you where we are in that process and kind of what I hope the timing is. But our last meeting, put together kind of a very, very structured brainstorming session. We're art people, it can get a little out of control. And we came up with 3 areas to focus that planning on. One is I guess, that chunk of public art that's the sculpture or other pieces that are visible in the community. The second area is in cataloging and creating something that similar councils have done in other cities, and Jane had found this great example in Vail, Colorado. I think it was Vail, right? Mm-hmm. And, where is our public art? What is it? There's a photograph. It has an online presence, and there is an actual catalog of what we actually own as a city, which there currently is not. And the third area, the Arts Council right now is attempting to come up with an idea of what we could possibly do with the amphitheater at Luther Burbank to do something more there. But what they're all working on, what we're all working on in groups right now, is to come up with the scope of what those possibly would be, what kind of budget would you be looking at, what time frame. And I think once we have kind of those initial proposals together, we'll be able to bring hopefully even one or two of them to you to look at as something that we might either further develop as a proposal or to start moving forward with as a project. The one I see moving forward right now is this cataloging project, and the one that I see kind of further developing would be the Luther Burbank and the public art areas. So that's kind of where we are. We're also taking our 3-year plan approach, and we've had to kind of break it up over meetings. So next time, for example, we're looking at ongoing programming like Mostly Music, Shakespeare, and the other programs that we do with like Aljoya, and where we want to over the long term, make our financial investments and our investments as an organization in terms of our time. So I mean, each of these events, Mostly Music, Shakespeare, Aljoya, the gallery, I'm there on Saturdays helping with the others, help people hang the artwork. We're at each and every one of those events. Someone from the council is introducing the event, introducing the sponsors. So it's not just coming up with the stuff. We got to show up to every single one of them and demonstrate, that we are obviously supportive of it. But it's, we're doing that planning process with in mind, what can we actually do, given most people work and have families and other things that they do.
And you'll see on page 14 of the work plan, under public art, they have as their plan for this year, identifying appropriate projects or sculptures for the outdoor gallery, researching proposals, estimating costs, create project proposal packets. Those packets would be coming to you. We don't have them on our budget, so in order for any of them to become a reality, you would have to approve the project, and we would have to ask for a budget amendment to get money transferred from 1% into our working budget. So very early preliminary brainstorming planning from the Arts Council so that we could bring it to you.
But we are moving forward. That was the big excitement.
Can I just make a quick comment? The first one is, great work. It's wonderful to go around the island and there's little pockets, and then there's also the downtown, which I think is starting to be something of a center. But I'd also like to reiterate, I think, the principle of Dan's comments, and that is, it is a tough economic time. We're going to be facing some challenging decisions coming up. One of the requests that I would like is that you consider how do we align some of the investment or the development in the arts with the goal of bringing more business and energy to the downtown sector. I know that's one of those mutually supporting ways of moving forward and spending our money, and that's certainly what I would be hoping to see come forward as well.
And that was something that was tough for us when we decided not to move forward with the Third Thursday program this year, because that is, feet on the ground walking in those business doors. But we are looking for new opportunities and partnerships with the businesses that have been sponsors in the past, especially kind of in the area of the literacy programs. We've been talking to, some of the usual folks around the island, but, I think to the extent that we can have our programming, bring money into the stores and stuff before a Mostly Music event, or, have people go in and getting their stuff at the delis at one of the stores even before Shakespeare, that kind of thing does generate revenue for our downtown businesses. And it's something that we're always kind of have our eye to, especially when we're looking at placement of things or, how we launch things. I think the space art, could be something that does draw a lot of people to the island because of the educational aspects that we talked about when you guys approved it. So,
also following up on Debbie's comments, one of the things that was talked about at our planning session in January was the possibility, at least, of a significant development in the town center that would be connected with light rail, and so there would be a governmental involvement in that development. It's not clear yet what the city's role will be in that, but the city will have some role in that. If it does come to pass, I would expect to be a very significant part of our town center, and there might be some opportunity to do a major piece of art as part of that project, just to keep in the back of your mind.
Do you have timing that I can take back to the council on if that was something that, if we had the opportunity to do a larger art piece, would that be something we would have the opportunity for 4 years from now or 8 years from now? When should we start to build that into our planning process?
I think
likely planning timeframe would be in the next 18 months, and implementation anywhere from 2 to 5 years.
So we could actually start building that into
Yeah,
our
start
public
thinking
art
about it.
making for...
Yeah.
Okay.
If you can get
We have a meeting next
Michelangelo's
week, so that's
David,
exciting.
That'd be good.
yeah, just
The
Do you want the broken version?
Well, the Arts Council was really supportive when there was an idea of the plaza going in downtown, of having an art component there, so they would be, I think, very supportive of this.
No, I just mentioned that because that would be a very dramatic opportunity to really
Well, that's such a
support the
visible
town
thing
center.
when you first get to the island. If you, from a light rail, say, for example, I mean, to have that be your first impression. And that's something that we're keenly aware of. So we'll add that to the planning specifically.
That's great. Are there any other comments from the council?
Great job, Christine.
Thanks.
And
Mike, did you have
Amber.
anything else?
I was just going to, you kind of did a 180 on me there, Councilmember, Mr. Mayor. I would just be very conscientious about the public out there. Are we at art saturation with statues out there? I don't know. Maybe we are, maybe we aren't. But I would be very conscientious here on the council on the, if we see a 6-digit figure art piece out there, meanwhile we complain or talk about tough budgets and have to raise taxes, develop an argument for raising taxes. The council will hear it if we raise taxes at one meeting and at the next meeting approve a 6-digit piece of art, especially since, you know, beauty is in the eye. This is what I said during the space piece. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Okay.
Well, Mike, I hope you come when we have our big unveil when it's installed. And you can see what truly cool art these are, and they're very educational as well. And I will specifically make a point to our planning group, you know, that we do need to be very conscious of the public perception of how we're spending our money given these difficult economic times. And I think that's something that the group will take very seriously and be very conscious of in the planning process.
And thank you for all the work you're doing
Thanks.
on the council, or the Arts
Yeah,
Committee.
and Mike, just in response to your comment, right now, the existing ordinance essentially directs the Art Council to do what they're doing. If we want to give the Arts Council a different direction, that would require us to change the ordinance, and I'm not saying that's inappropriate to do, but if you want to pursue that, then that's something you need to consider, and we can put on a discussion down the road. But right now, the ordinance is written, the Arts Council is acting consistent with the ordinance.
And thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's a very good point. And, you know, without doing any lobbying for it, is the council interested in seeing the issue, or the things that we have, or the limitations, or expanding the limitations that we have put on the Arts Council to maybe give us some flexibility or relief on budget matters? Just tee it up.
You know, I think right now what we've, at least what I've said to Christine and to Amber, is that before they get overly invested in any project, they, and I'm sure Jane will do this, will make sure that the council is aware of where they're going. And if at that time we think it's necessary to do a course correction, then we should do it. But I'm not, at least I don't have a personal appetite right now for changing the ordinance in the absence of a compelling need. I mean, we may get through the budget process and find out that we've got a huge problem that we're not presently aware of. But based upon where we are at this very moment, I don't think that's the
Well,
case.
okay, where are we with the fireworks funding? What's the timeline on that?
Well, Diane and I talked about it this week by email, and I think the short answer is we are confident that the fireworks is funded for summer celebration.
Is that through
Some
donations?
Some through donations, and some through just the summer celebration budget. It sort of gets absorbed in the bigger picture, as we have done in years past. We did pretty well on fundraising last year. I suspect there's some dollars that kind of carried over from last year. No?
Diane Mortensen, Recreation Superintendent. Great question. We are moving along with fundraising for the fireworks. We're banking on a pretty significant donation for the entire summer celebration. All that money goes into one pot, so we can shift it around. But we are raising money for summer celebration fireworks, for general summer celebration events, about $24,000 for music in the park, another $25,000 for just general special events. So we do have a handful of sponsorships and donations and fundraising we're doing this year, just as we did last year, tapping the same community, tapping the same organizations. We're a little behind on patron donations. We're doing pretty well with grants, but again, we're hopeful and very confident we'll pull through again this year.
And we're proceeding with the same actions that we have to take to secure the fireworks.
We are.
I mean, it's not like we're waiting for money. We're going forward.
Yeah, we are.
I actually just want to applaud that effort to make it a public-private partnership. And I think, and especially in tough budget times, I think that's a really great way to leverage dollars. So that's great.
Well, if I may, but I hear that, and I appreciate that, and I'm all for a public-private partnership when you get to a point. But when I see that we're sitting on $300,000, I kind of question: are we at that point of having to go to the public and spend staff time on asking for donations for what I'm going to qualify as music in the park? That's an art function which you're fully engaged in. And then I would expand that to the fireworks. That's art entertainment also. So that's the public-private partnership is wonderful, but I question the way we paint the true need of it, especially when we're sitting on $300,000 in the arts fund.
Mike, I want to point out, too, that the 1% for art is for public art, and it also maintains all of the art that the city currently has. There's art that needs to be restored and repaired and maintained and sometimes moved from in the outdoor art gallery. So it's fun to not only purchase but to maintain all the art that we currently have. And that can be a significant amount sometime.
Yeah, it can be.
Okay. If there are no other questions, if I could get a motion on the bottom of page 1.
Mayor, I'd like to move to receive the Arts Council 2011 annual report and approve the Arts Council 2012 work plan.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. And just to echo what's also been said by almost everyone else up here, Christine, Amber, Diane, thanks for everything you do on this. Particularly Christine, you and your volunteers to do the Arts Council. I also had the opportunity to be liaison to the Arts Council for a relatively short period, but it was amazing the amount of dedication and effort that all the members of the Arts Council provided. As Tana said, over 1,000 volunteer hours in 2011, another 1,000 or so projected for 2012. I mean, that's huge. And we're so fortunate to have all of you willing to put your time in to make this island as fantastic as it is. Thanks, Christine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next agenda bill 4717, Fire Station Architectural Services Agreement Approval. Mr. Betcher, once again.
Thank you, Mayor Grouse, Council. So since the Council last discussed Fire Station 92 a couple months back at your planning session, Miller Hall Architects has been selected for the first phase of project design, and a proposed architectural services agreement, scope of work and budget has been negotiated. The proposed budget for pre-design, as we're calling this current or upcoming phase of work, is set at $92,588. The scope of work and schedule is laid out in Exhibit 3. That's fairly detailed. The scope and schedule requires the development of 3 design concepts and a refined construction cost estimate to be ready for council consideration on June 16th at your mini planning session. In our work to date, I want to make this real clear, in our work to date, and it will continue, staff has been mindful of Council's desire to be sensitive to concerns about the size of a replacement Station 92. The agreement with Miller Hall, as your agenda bill notes, was drafted with the assistance of Brian Cadith, who's an outside attorney who helps us often on matters requiring expertise in construction and government contracts. So with that, with your authorization, the city manager will sign the agreement and we're ready to get to work. And as you move toward questions, here with me to help with that tonight is Sean Roberts, partner in charge with Miller Hall on our project, and Deputy Chief Steve Heitman. Thanks.
Thank you. Rich?
Yeah, I'd like to jump in real quickly before you ask questions. First, in just the vein of an endorsement, as you've picked up, Miller Hall was the firm that we retained to design the community center. Actually, we retained them twice to design the community center. One a little bigger than the one that got built, and then the one that got built. And I just can't say enough about the firm. I worked with them very closely during that time, and they were extremely responsive to everything we asked for. And usually what we asked for was less. You know, cut the cost, find some other way, we need to get the numbers down. And they did, but they retained the integrity of that design, and the proof is sitting up there on 24th, and it stands on its own. So I was delighted to hear when Glenn said that when they went through their selection process that they were both a finalist and ultimately the one selected. I think you'll get a good product out of them, and I think you'll get it at a good price.
Questions for Glenn, Sean, and or Steve?
Does that go through a bidding process? I'm just interested.
It's the architectural selection process in the public sector is very well prescribed in state law. It's not a bidding process. It's a request for qualifications. So you go through, you put it out on the street, you request qualifications of qualified architectural firms. They submit. You then pick finalists. You go through a vetting process and you pick finalists. You interview them, and then you select one firm, and then you negotiate the service agreement, which is what you have here before you tonight. The law is very clear that you can't put it out to bid. In other words, the criteria for selection is not price, it's qualifications. So the first step, pick by qualifications. Second step is negotiate the service agreement, the costs and the services, and then you go forward.
I have additional questions, Mr. Mayor?
Sure.
I'm not sure who I address this to. I have it in the agenda packet. It said that leads was an assumption, but then in the request for qualifications by the City of Mercer Island, that's not one of the assumptions. So what list do I go for as a valid list of the assumptions?
Well, I believe in the RFQ, experience with lead design buildings was a criteria.
And why is that?
It's standard practice today when a fire station or a public facility is built that you at least explore what sort of LEED certification may be possible within available budget.
Well, the reason I bring that up is because obviously, I'm looking to get the biggest bang out of our bucks. The school district, OSPI, they don't require LEED, public building. They don't require LEED. They have standards within OSPI that fulfill many of the reasons that you would do LEED, but because it's not LEED qualified, they're not looking for that ribbon for LEED. They save significant amount of money, but still get the same building. So I'll again ask, I think we really need to look at why we want to do LEED. I don't think it's as obvious as, well, that's the way we do it. Another reason, I was introduced not too long ago to the JLAR, Joint Legislative Audit and Reserve Review Committee, and this was just a several months ago, their review of LEED buildings was that it adds 1 to 3% in the in the building design and construction costs. And here again, I think I'm uncomfortable with it being an assumption that we're going to go LEED, because just like the schools, OSPI has discovered that you can accomplish the same thing by adopting the standards, but not doing all the administrative paperwork to get that LEED picture in the paper.
It might be worthwhile to have Sean respond to that, just from her experience, as to, because what the agenda bill said is that the expectation is that the LEED would have no or minimal impact on the costs, and probably Sean is in the best position to talk to that issue as the architect's representative.
Hi, I'm Sean Roberts. I'm with Miller Hall, and I'm sorry I'm sick. So, I'm also, full disclosure, I'm a resident of Mercer Island as well.
And full disclosure, her husband's in my Coyotes.
Yes, indeed. So, in terms of whether or not you do LEED, I think still think it's a choice. I believe it is a choice for this project. I don't believe you're required to. Okay, so. In terms of adding cost to the project, there is some additional cost in administration, and as Councilmember Ciro mentioned, in terms of being able to sort of get the LEED certification. So there's some work that is required to document everything that you've done, and then to basically get the plaque. So there's documentation and there's review costs and all that go along with it. That's where the additional cost is typically. Most of the strategies that we use in today's design and construction world will get you to that point, regardless of whether we go through the effort of getting it LEED certified. So while I'm a great proponent of LEED, and it's done a lot for green building and for improving the way we design and build in the world today, it's not a requirement for this project. It will add a minimal amount of cost, probably not 1 to 3%, but there would be some cost associated in just the review and approval of it. So probably be like, going to be in the $5 million range. It might be like a $50,000 to $100,000 add to the project.
So Sean, just make sure I understand what you just said. So to actually construct it, there's not a significant additional cost. It's more the paperwork to.
Yeah.
So we as a council, if we chose, could tell you build the LEED, but we'll do without the plaque.
Yeah. Don't tell my green building friends I said that, but yes.
Okay. So I mean, in Mike, $50,000 to $100,000, but that's what it comes to. That's the significant amount of money, and I think the council would need to make that determination. Obviously, we're more interested in the result than the plaque. So I shouldn't say obviously, but at least I'm more interested in the result than the plaque.
Okay.
Mike, did you have other questions?
Can I make a comment on that?
Sure.
I would like to just note that sustainability was recently added to the charter for Mercer Island, and so I think a large government-funded building having it not be LEED certified would be maybe a surprise, or I'm not sure, a disconnect. Thank you, with the new charter. And additionally, the sustainability task force that we talked about at the last meeting had their first meeting, and we identified 5 areas that we were looking at closely, and one of those 5 areas was building codes and greening building codes. And so I think that I would imagine that something like this large project would come back with a strong recommendation for it indeed to be LEED built.
What do you mean, come back from where?
With a suggestion from the Sustainability Task Force, as we're looking at future buildings on Mercer Island, that it would encourage the, again, getting a little ahead of the game there, but that a LEED certified or sustainable building codes is something that we're looking at and see as important from this community task force.
Can I jump in?
Sure.
I think I'm going to agree again with Dan that it's the principles that we're after, it's the end result, it's the design. If perhaps there is some economic advantage, tax advantage, incentives, et cetera, by pursuing the plaque and therefore offsetting some of the administrative costs, I would certainly be very excited and interested. But my presumption is that, again, in agreement that the principle is this is the way we're going to move forward and be building our public facilities, but if what we're looking at is purely an administrative cost, I would have somewhat greater reservations and then look and ask if there was economic incentive, tax incentive, et cetera, to do so.
And I probably have made a mistake in letting us move off of questions, so why don't we just go back to questions, then we get back, then we can come to discussion. Did you have more questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have Sean, the schedule here has week 1 starting today. Are we rushing you too much? And as as I'm sure you'll say no, but
Mike asks and answers his own question, just so you know.
But it seems odd that we're having this discussion and we have a schedule right here that started today, and I worry that we're putting we're rushing the design part too much, because, measure twice, cut once type thing, that we're rushing it too much just to hit this June self-imposed deadline by the council.
I mean, obviously, it's an active schedule, and that's why it starts as soon as you approve, if you approve this tonight. But basically, this phase of design is all about making sure that before you move forward, you have a project that makes sense. So our purpose here is to get to a certain level of design, but it's also to do things like make sure we understand what the utility situations are so we don't end up with some big surprise when we go forward. Make sure that our structural engineers and our mechanical engineers have taken a look at what the requirements are going to be for this kind of project. We've had a chance to work with the chief and all the firefighters to understand what their needs are, so that when we get to that cost estimate at the end of this, you can have something that you feel accurately reflects what the project is going to need. And then when you go forward to figure out how to fund it, you're not going to have to go back afterwards, right? So that's our goal here. And we feel like this amount of time is an appropriate amount of time. It's not super long and it's not super short, but if we start right now, we feel like we can get you to that point by June, basically.
I have another question, and that has to do with the project scope. And I know that the mayor has asked several questions along this line. Have we defined the mission or the new mission of this fire station, which I suppose would certainly drive the building? Or is that do we have to ask that question, or what is the mission of this building, this new building? Does the mission remain the same, or et cetera? Is that a council discussion point?
Ultimately, I believe it's a discussion point, but if you, in the RFQ, they make certain basic assumptions regarding what the station is going to include for purposes of this contract. It's going to have 3 pieces of equipment there, it's going to have 3 firefighters, 4 dorm rooms, I think, and it doesn't say much beyond that. I think that, like, I'm sure staff has taken to heart the prior direction from the council regarding the need to do this as cost effectively as possible. But yeah, I think, Mike, the basic mission either is going to be a fire station or it's going to be a medic one type station, and I think the decision has been made by the council, maybe not absolutely formally, but I think implicitly the decision's been made by the council to maintain this as a fire station, and that's the direction that the staff is going.
The fundamental operational assumptions of South Station have remained the same, and that was implicit in the council's direction to proceed with the design and have it ready for a financing decision in June. Because if you wanted to rethink how we deliver fire suppression and emergency medical services on Mercer Island, because you would change the physical layout and function of the buildings, we'd be at this for much, much longer than between now and June. So they're going at it as essentially the same operational configurations as they've got now.
Any other questions?
Yeah, in terms of operational configuration, I noted that a line in the request for qualifications says that with the increases in call volume and service requests, and I'm wondering, is that defined as something happening currently at the South End Station? And also, I would be curious to know, why are there 4 dorm rooms? Are there currently 4 dorm rooms in the South End Station?
Steve Heitman, Deputy Fire Chief. No, it actually is currently, there are 4 beds down there for crew that come in earlier for early relief, that sort of thing, but it's actually an open dorm at this time.
But with 3 firefighters on duty, there's only 3 at a time generally, right?
Generally, there are only 3 at that station,
So I was
yes.
just wondering why 4 rooms if there's just 3?
Because we have individuals living all the way from South Olympia up to Bow, and sometimes they'll come in and stay the night prior to their shift, and so we've accommodated that over the years.
Okay. And then in terms of the increase in call volume, is that like all over the island or specifically?
Yes, we've held fairly stable, but over the years we've increased our call volume. And so, again, in anticipation of that, especially as the South End is developed, then we'll expect to see a higher call volume.
Thanks, Steve.
Other questions?
I want to understand, if I understand this correctly. So the reason we're driving for entailing the additional expense is basically what it is for 4 rooms versus 3 firefighters, 3 rooms, is to accommodate those who choose to live so far away that they have to come in early?
No, that is not the reason. That is one of the reasons that we've used in the past. It's also for periods when we increase staffing, say due to inclement weather, and we have to have additional staffing in there.
Sure, I'm sorry, Debbie, just one, so I understand that. Normally, when you've got 3 firefighters or 4 firefighters there, I assume there's always at least one who's not sleeping. Or is that not a right assumption?
That is not a correct assumption. They can all be sleeping at the same time.
I'll just add in a little bit, too, because I think that the minimum shift is 3 firefighters on duty. It can be more. I think you said that, but it sometimes is more, so.
Yes.
Mine are fairly logistical questions, so I would actually defer then if there's questions of more substance for the Deputy Chief.
Well, I have questions, but go ahead. You should ask yours.
Okay. It was in the planning schedule. The first point is that I noted the week of April 16th through the 20th, an initial public meeting open house. That is just 2 weeks away. Time seems a little bit short. I'm not quite sure what the standard would be, but one of the other suggestions I might add, if compatible with schedules and contract, is that at a place like Leap for Green, we might have some small opportunity for this project to be explained or discussed with general public.
That's a great idea. We're going to actually talk, hopefully this week, about a strategy for this. I agree, it's very quick. Our intent in putting it in there was, first of all, just to make sure we had a placeholder for it, but we felt like it was important to get public comment and it's a little bit of public feedback before we actually come back with designs and start showing something, so we can get a sense of what people are thinking, especially since it's really the first kind of major thing that's happening down in that South End for quite some time. So that's the intent, and how we manage that, I think, will continue to develop.
Okay, and then just another quick point. It just says other briefing materials to be used at the mini planning session provided by Wednesday, June 13th. If possible, I think it would be great to have that perhaps Monday, June 11th. Apologies if that would create a difficult weekend for anybody, but when it's a project of this magnitude, I would hope to have a little bit extra time and the ability to come back with questions for staff and or yourself to make sure that we're thoroughly understanding what we're embarking on.
Sure.
Yeah, we typically produce the notebooks that go out to you for the retreats about a week in advance, so your timing is about exactly right.
Any other questions from the council? I have a few questions. First, for either Glenn or for Rich, the council has authorized I think, about 300 some odd thousand for this phase of the project, and this contract is 92,000. So what else is how much of the rest of the 300?
You authorized the 300,000 that contemplates complete design. That would get us all the way to construction documents. And we wouldn't authorize the use of, or even suggest to authorize that until after you get financing arranged. So this is just contracting for the design work that is sufficient to give the public a sense of what generally is it going to look like and a reliable number for financing purposes.
So that's my second question. Sometime, I don't haven't memorized the schedule. What are the deliverables in this project that the council is going to end up with in May or June or whenever?
The deliverables will be plan section elevation of, the design, basically at a schematic level, rendering or two, and narratives from all of our engineers about what needs to happen structurally, mechanically, civil, engineering-wise. There would be, let's see, cost estimate, detailed cost estimate of what that would cost. I think that's...
Do you have any, besides what is in the RFQ, do you have any direction from the department as to which rooms are supposed to, what the facilities are that are supposed to be in this?
Just what you have, yeah.
Okay. And so what is the process going forward then, Rich or Glenn or Steve, as to how the what the building requirements, how they're going to be communicated to the architect?
The relationships that we have set up for managing this project are, it'll be managed out of the city manager's office, and the client, in this case, will be the chief and deputy chief, the fire department. So if you think of, you're the homeowner, you've gone out and you've hired sort of an owner's rep to run your project for you, and they go out and hire an architect. That's kind of how this is going to work. And I think I can read between the lines at why you asked that question, in terms of having a check for where the hard questions will be asked for. Are the requirements that are being presumed in this design truly requirements? That will happen out of our office. And then, of course, we'll rely on Miller Hull. They've designed fire stations before, too, to also be advisors on what are the spatial requirements and the real needs. So I think you're going to get several checks and balances in the process for cost control and sort of sensible design.
Do we know already, whether this is a one-story building or a two-story building, or is that?
In all likelihood, there'll be a two-story component. The site is just too small right now to be able to get all of that in one story, but we haven't gotten to that point yet. We just designed a very similar size facility in the city of Seattle and just kind of looked at the site relationships, and so that's our thought.
I would also note that in week 2, there is a discussion of having a city council member from the sustainability subcommittee on the owner team. So if that also gets to your concern, Dan, about whether there's city council involvement at any stage in this, that indeed it's built in here. And Glenn, I would just say I'm not sure what our schedule is on the sustainability subcommittee, but being the only member present from the sustainability subcommittee, I'm not sure. Again, I can't remember what our schedule is, but if you need a member to volunteer for that and looking at the timing and being the person in town, I'm happy to be that.
Okay, thank you.
I got a question. Why is that? I mean, don't we have a public safety commission? Wouldn't this fall in the bailiwick of the Public Safety Commission?
This is not a policy decision anymore. This is design. You guys need to give the staff and the architects direction to proceed with this design. So it isn't a review, and it's not the Sustainability Committee doing any kind of a particular review of the project. They are representing the interest to make sure that the city's sustainability practices or discussions that we've had have been considered. But I urge you not to have the council decide you want to run this project, because we will not finish it very soon. Certainly not in the time frame that you've laid out for us.
Then why is there a city council, I mean, why wouldn't a city council member, that city council member that's to represent, evidently to represent the council, why wouldn't that city council member come from the Public Safety Committee?
The city council member from the Sustainability Committee is not there to represent the council. It's there to just, it's not for purposes of the overall design. It's just for purposes of addressing any of the lead issues, presumably. But, I mean, Mike, I understand your concern, and it's a concern I think that both Bruce and I have already communicated to Rich outside of this in our periodic discussions we have with Rich. So I think Rich is aware of the need for the restraints that the council have already placed on this project, and so there will be other council input, I'm sure, as we go along.
So this council member here is to give lead guidance?
My assumption is, and I don't know why this is what was written in here, but my assumption is to be a sounding board solely on environmental issues and not on anything else.
That's exactly right.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion.
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to move to authorize the city manager to sign the architectural engineering services agreement with Miller Hall for Fire Station 92 pre-design.
Second.
Discussion.
Mr. Mayor.
Sure. Go ahead.
One thing we haven't talked about as a council, and that is, I mean, it's the whole community, and this is one of the reasons why I didn't want to go forward at the planning session. I didn't want to go forward with this, which may seem odd, being a huge proponent for 5 years of getting a fire station, a new fire station. You know, the timing, it's real estate, is location, project like this is timing. And we've got something else going on in the community, and that's the school bond. And I don't want to be a betting man right here, but I think we might look at the school bond twice. And I worry that if we have to look at it twice, my intent is to clear the deck for the school bond, and that this area, and that what may happen is that in June, we're going to be in a position of either competing against a school bond or having to delay this project out for another year or so before everybody settles down to the big bond, and then that develops a question of what's going to happen to the accuracy of the cost estimate, which is problematic if you either have to go through the process again for a new, more accurate cost estimate, or you go forward with a bad cost estimate, then we lose some credibility. So I would like to hear other perspectives on, are we crowding out the school bond if the school bond has to go another round?
I mean, I can respond that this was a decision of the council to do what has been proposed here. Any decision can be reconsidered by the council, but right now the decision by the council made at the planning session, I believe it was the planning session.
Well, we didn't make any decision at the planning, remember.
The direction given by council at the planning session was to have the city manager move forward with this. He's done exactly what the council directed him to do. I'm
not questioning that, Mr. Mayor. I'm not questioning that. With more time behind us, with more of a picture of what the situation looks like out there, I'm concerned, like I was before, but even now so, that we're risking crowding out or giving the too many bonds out there or public financing out there for the community, and jeopardizing possibly both of them.
I want to thank you, Councilmember Sarah, for raising the issue of the school bond and for showing some support for the need for school investment. At our last meeting, we did talk about, when we were looking at some of the budget assumptions, we talked about being clear that on April 18th, we would have more information about the school bond and that we would kind of make an additional decision based on that. So I think what we discussed at the planning session and then reaffirmed last meeting did take that into account. So I think that that's an important point, and I think what we reaffirmed at last meeting when we talked about budget assumptions and waiting until that date to make any specific movements. But I think this pre-design and design will be necessary so that we have something in hand to move forward with whatever outcome, the soonest outcome that we could possibly want. And so I think it's important to move forward on that so that we still do have this at hand when we're ready to go forward.
Jane, do you want to?
Oh, yes, I was going to make the same point Tana did, and also remind everyone that we've been talking about a new fire station at the south end for a very long time and delaying it, and I understand that no matter what happens, there would not be, if the school bond does not pass, there will not be a school bond on the ballot in November. I'm very sensitive, of course, as we all are, to the fact that we don't want to be competing with the school district. They have huge needs, and we need to be very sensitive to the fact that we have the same constituents, this small island. But I think it's we might be waiting for several years, and we have not gone to the voters for a bond issue for the city in a very long time. We did not go to the voters for a community center when we finally built it.
For the park levy.
It was the last time was a park levy for Luther Burbank Park. So anyway, I think it's difficult, but I think we should go forward at least with this project to April when we know more, and if there's a compelling reason to not go forward with an issue on a November ballot, then so be it. We pull back.
Just a quick comment, then. I'm going to support Jane in this one. We need to do some of the pre-work, which is inevitable. I also believe that the fire station has been put off for years and years, sometimes for understandable reasons, but also I think also it has perhaps been a Tier 2 project. I don't think it can remain a Tier 2 project. I think that there is substantial need, growing need, for some emergency services on the south end, and I will respect the school bond, prioritize the school bond, but I also do not want to see us put the south end fire station off any longer than absolutely necessary at this point.
Are there any other comments? The only one I would make, Katie or Brian, if Brian did this, I appreciated the work for hire provision in this agreement, which essentially means the city owns the work product, which is not always the case when you're dealing with architects. So I appreciated seeing that in the contract. So if for whatever reason we part company with Miller Hall down the road, we don't have to argue with them over who owns their work product on this. So those were nicely drafted.
And in the interest of, may I make one more comment? I'm sorry. In the interest of good relations with your architect, the presumption is we're going to go right on forward, we're going to get financing, and you guys are going to design this thing.
Just playing my lawyer's hat.
I always double check when the lawyer's involved.
So there's a motion on the table. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Sean. Hopefully you can go back to bed now and get yourself better. And Glenn, Steve, I gather you're probably hanging around for something here. Your night's not done yet. No. The last item on the agenda in regular business is Agenda Bill 4722, the BLS fee for ambulance transport metrics report. Steve.
Okay. Again, Steve Heitman, Deputy Fire Chief. Good evening, members of the council, Mr. City Manager. I'm here tonight to present Agenda Bill 4722, which is the BLS Fee for Transport report. As you know, in 2011, we began charging for our transport from the Mercer Island Fire Department as an identified revenue source to help bridge some of the gap that we were finding within the budget. The council expressed concern regarding the impacts of the transport program relative to risk exposure and the ability of the fire department to subsequently respond to emergency calls if we were out transporting. So to assess this impact, council directed staff to conduct a performance analysis of the transport program to test the following hypothesis. The Mercer Island Fire Department will maintain and or improve patient care while simultaneously collecting revenue from the transportation of medical patients. We put in place metrics that would help us to analyze this and measure this. Some of those metrics were the impact on mutual aid or automatic aid activity during transports, internal impacts to the fire department, how long our units were out of service, and the criteria used in the decision for transport. Within your packets, you'll see that we provided the information that we gathered, the data that we gathered from this. After a one-year period, staff's assessment is that this program has been a success. As you can see, there has been very little negative impact from this, and we are hitting the benchmarks revenues from our revised figures that we had proposed. During this 12-month period, we feel that patient care has been improved because our crews are staying with that patient from the beginning of the call till they arrive at the hospital on many more calls. And we feel that our firefighters are using sound judgment when making that decision to transport. This has virtually had no impact on our mutual aid agreements or any of the automatic aid that we receive from neighboring departments. We've provided you with a lot of information, so I know your time is valuable. I will answer your questions.
Questions for the Deputy Chief? Mr. Cira.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is an annual review. Is that the purpose of this?
No,
yes.
This was the review that was requested. The council has not yet requested that they update this every year. At this point, this is a one-off annual review, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it was part of your decision in the fall of 2010 that you would want to see 12 months of data after we implemented it, which turned out to be March of 11. So we're March of 12 now, and here's your 1 year data check.
Okay, so I don't understand the metric here for annual collected revenue. Why was that changed?
That was changed for several reasons. The initial number that was put out would be that we would conduct 700 transports a year based on the figures that we received from AMR, but we also provided guidelines for our officers to make a decision to still have AMR do those transports, which lowered that number from the 700 down to the 500 or 600. Also, we have a higher percentage of Medicare and DSHS patients, which automatically drops the amount that we're collecting.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, you're moving the goalposts. This is, I mean, we set this program with projections, and you either hit those projections or not. I don't understand why we're moving the goalposts at an annual review. I'm actually somewhat taken aback that there was a revision to the projected that we had been briefed upon during the inception of this program.
The goalposts didn't move. They moved last January 2012. We came back, actually I think we gave you a heads up in November during the mid-biennial budget process, and you said, well, give us a report in January, which we did. And at that time, the department revised its original November 2010 estimates down by about 25%, and they have now upped that by about $5,000 in revenue from the January of this year estimate. So the reality is, we in 12 months brought in less revenue than we originally estimated when we had never done this before. Now we've done it for a year. We now know what it takes to do this program, what we'll get out of it. And when we came to the council and said that, in January, you said, okay, let's extend this out through the end of 2012, and then we will reconsider it all as part of the next biennial budget.
Okay, I missed that revision.
I'll just add, too, for the record, if you'll recall, one of the factors we hadn't accounted for was the travel fee or the
mileage fee.
The mileage fee, and we've amended that. Correct.
Correct.
Well, okay, you brought that up. It's always, when you kind of do an annual review, it's always...
Just pursuing questions.
I got it. Well, okay, then I don't have a question on that. I have a question on another one. So, the original fee FAQs that we had a year ago stipulated that patients will not pay out-of-pocket expenses. Are any patients paying for out-of-pocket expenses?
They are being billed if they do not have insurance, yes.
So why are we billing patients if our proposal is stipulated that patients will not pay out-of-pocket expenses? When I'm a citizen who chooses to accept medical expenses out of my pocket and I get billed by the city, isn't that kind of saying that you will pay these pocket expenses? I mean, I'm not going to take on the city.
Hey, Councilmember Cyril, this is City Attorney Katie Knight. I would add to that, if you recall that when we first bought the program and we were talking about requirements that this is all consistent with Medicaid and Medicare, the poor and indigent are not, they don't have to pay, but there are some people on this island who choose to be self-insured and are financially able to be self-insured and don't need to have insurance like many of the rest of us. Those are the folks that, if they are able to pay, need to pay in order for us to be compliant, that there's no Medicaid or Medicare fraud. And that was one of the things, if you recall, everybody was very concerned about.
That wasn't, though, what he is referring to is something different. What we said November of 2010 was that unlike AMR, that bills a patient and their insurance company, actually bills their insurance company, if they don't receive from the insurance company everything that they bill, AMR will then bill the patient to try and collect the balance. We said we wouldn't do that, and we haven't.
We have not. That's correct.
So
I just think that the clarification Steve was making is, though, that everybody gets billed.
Yes.
You asked if they have to pay. Those are two separate things.
But we will accept whatever the insurance company pays us, and that settles the matter.
Correct. Although if someone is self-insured.
That's correct. If they don't have insurance at all, then we do bill directly.
Correct.
Which we said we would do from the beginning.
I'm just reading right here. Okay, no. Thank you.
Further questions?
Yeah, I have a question. On page 7, you refer to the fact that the Mercer Island Fire Department transports 1.6 patients daily, which I'm understanding is currently about 20% of the total from the calls that you have. In our previous discussion, there was reference to trending upwards, meaning that there were more calls coming through and that the demand for emergency services was increasing. Is it increasing at any sort of substantial rate? Would we anticipate that 1.6 patients, I mean, there's not such a thing as a 0.6 patient, but understanding from a statistical perspective, the entire patient should go.
Sometimes we do with body parts. The trend is that over the years, we are slowly moving upwards, but there is not a definitive, identifiable, yes, we're going up at this rate, so that I could tell you that 2 years from now we'll be at 1.7. That is just the way that the trend has gone. If you look at our statistics and how often we've transported, that's also based on the comfort level of our crews in initiating this program that they were not used to.
Okay. The other question I have is there a geographic distribution to the calls? I would say probably based on density that there's just some general weighting towards the north part of the island, but do we anticipate that being consistent, or can you even
It
tell me
is
what the
fairly
baseline
consistent this time. About two-thirds of our calls are on what we consider the north end of the island.
And we anticipate that remaining or perhaps growing?
I would say it will probably move more towards, as we build on the north end, that there will be more calls as those structures come in and we have higher density housing.
Okay. Care centers, I was thinking
Yes.
the senior population as well.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any other questions by the council? I had a question on the, I didn't totally understand the numbers that, I think sort of a little bit what Debbie was talking about. She was saying that we transport about 20%. Maybe that was in here, but what I was looking at on page 8 of the agenda bill, it shows that we did not transport 340, but we did transport 600. So does that mean we transported that's why I'm not sure what I'm looking at in terms of how many opportunities did we, is this 340 because I know as part of the 340 is, for example, 92 is patient left at scene. So I assume nobody transported them.
Correct.
So how many actually were how many situations did we not transport that we could have transported? Because it's obviously, it should be less than, a lot more than 20%.
Yes. Let me make sure that I understand so you're saying out of the total number we transported, I think we're going to hit 575 transports, but we've gone on over 900 EMS calls, and so those are distributed across that graph on why they were not transported.
So basically we're transporting about two-thirds of the EMS calls.
That are transportable, yes.
Right.
So the flip side of the question is, how many did AMR transport?
And that looks like that's medic transport's 35, and is medic transport AMR?
No, it is not. That is the Bellevue Medics.
So what is AMR in this thing?
This graph actually breaks down the other section for our reason not to transport, which is what council had requested of the chief last time.
So how many did AMR transport?
I do not have those statistics, but I can get that answer for you.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand and exactly how many people does the fire department not transport for whatever reason, but I'm not so interested in the patient left at the scene. I'm interested in this number were transportable, and I assume that's the 900 some odd number?
Correct.
Okay, so that's the 900 some odd number, and we transported about 600 of those. Okay.
Correct.
So AMR had
Okay.
113.
I got it. That's what I was wondering about. Right.
About 0.8 per day.
So the 0.8 person is doing better than the 0.6 person. It's more of them got to the hospital. That's just encouraging.
They just follow behind.
So is there any, we're beyond questions now, so it comes back to the council for discussion of the report. I mean, this is only receiving the report, but if there are thoughts on what might be next steps in this thing, let me ask the council first, and then you can...
Well, I was going to give you sort of some color commentary. Assuming no other direction or request from the council based on this, we will write a budget that includes the transport fee and presumes this level of revenue and transports, unless you guys have some other projections that are different than what you get out of this. And that's what you'll see in the budget.
The one thing now, we have an ordinance which terminates this as of December 31st, 2012. So I think one of the issues for the council is to whether to give staff direction on coming back with a change to that ordinance, if that's the will of the council, for a further discussion between now and sometime before December 31st. Be another issue, but and Mike, I'm sure you've got issues that you want to talk about, but we should identify all the things we want staff to do, if anything, between now and the end of the year on this issue? Jane?
I have a quick question, Steve. Are there any specific, well, what's your sense of the feeling of the firefighters about this program now that it's been in place for a year?
The majority of them are much more comfortable with it now that they've seen the results. I know we're getting good, positive feedback. They feel like they're actually providing better care. When AMR picks up, our guys are on scene. They assess the patient. They ask a number of questions. They take a blood pressure. They do an exam.
They repeat.
When AMR comes in, it's repeated. When they get to the hospital, it's repeated. And so it gives us a better quality of care for that continuation period. I think it makes the patient more comfortable. And to be perfectly honest, the people tend to be more comfortable when they know it's Mercer Island firefighters that are taking care of them, not some stranger who arrives for that.
Are there any particular individuals who choose never to transport and always to call AMR? Because
no, we do not have that issue. I receive a daily report every day, and I read through that, and we have asked them to put in the reason. If they do not transport, they need to justify the reason. And I've had a few that I've gone and talked to the individual about to find out why they didn't, but I have not had one as of yet where I thought that they made the wrong decision. They were able to justify their criteria for that. So, and we touched base on a few things. One of the ones that we had recently was traffic issues and the timing of it. But again, I feel that they're justified for not transporting and leaving the island vulnerable by getting caught in traffic.
Well, I, for one, would be in favor of the council coming back to extend this program. I think it is a fabulous program. It builds community. For one thing, I venture to guess that your Fill the Boot campaign will increase all the time because people see you, and if they've been in your home helping you, somehow there's a real bond there. And I think with the fact there's no complaints and no risk to the rest of the community with this program, and it is a revenue source for us, it is an excellent program.
Thank you.
Councilmember Braun, before you say that, I'd like to let you know or highlight that if you let this expire to my wishes, sunset, then I'll get a buzz cut and you get to see.
Oh, it'd almost be worth it. That's right.
So I would like the council to consider that before you give direction to the staff.
How about if we expire for 1 hour? Would that justify it?
We could do it in 10 minutes.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to say
Give you
something.
the buzz cut, huh? Would each council member have a slice or something?
If that's what it takes, sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I'm not for this tax, and the reason that is because I think that this is a priority of government that should come top out of our property taxes, our general fund, and that we are taxing the citizens in an inelastic fashion where there's really not much choice, so that we can finance other lesser priorities from our general fund. Having said that, Deputy Chief Heitman, and also pass this to Chief Tubbs, I recognize that there was a lot of pushback from your firemen, and it's to great credit to you and Chief Tubbs that you've been able to promote this new change in policy. With, as far as I can tell from your witness, and I mean I haven't heard anything to lead me to think otherwise. So well done on your leadership, Chief Tubbs' leadership, and also the professionalism of your lieutenants and firemen on that.
Thank you.
Further comments? Donna?
Is there something that we need to do to move forward with the discussion of instructing the staff to look at not sunsetting this?
I think what Rich was saying to me is that if, as part of the budget process, staff was planning on bringing back an ordinance, basically amending the current law on this, if it's the council's direction, I would encourage staff to expedite that. It's a one-liner, and it'd be nice to have that off the table, and assuming the council supports it.
I would support that.
I would.
Okay, so consider Rich, direction to bring this back at your convenience. You don't have to wait till November. Okay, and is there any other comments?
This is a little off the subject, but Tana reminded me tonight that it's probably precedent-setting that we have a female majority on the council, and we are exerting our power here, so for not often will we have a female majority, so it's a historic moment, yes.
Guys, don't say a word.
I won't. I can't.
Nothing good about saying anything.
I fully concur with the city manager on this
I
one.
can see this meeting going on till midnight.
Yes. I won't even respond to that. But Steve and I share what Mike said in terms of the success in this program. When we came up with this over a year ago now, and one of our classic, what some might refer to as a deal, that to get the fourth vote, I think that it was I think it worked nicely, and it was what we expected, and it is, despite Mike's suggestion as that we should pay for this by property tax, the fact is that the revenue on this is the equivalent of about a 3 or 4% property tax increase, and that's pretty significant in this day and age. So I think, and contrary to Mike's suggestion on the impact financially on Islanders, if anything, I submit as now as I did then that this actually saves Islanders a considerable amount of money for the reasons that Rich already mentioned, and but I do share with Mike the desire to make sure that our firefighters know that we appreciate them now embracing this program as they seem to be, and their efforts to make this a success. We would expect nothing less from them, and it's great that they've done what true professionals do with a situation like this.
Thank you. I'll pass that on.
So with that brings to the end of regular business. Council member absences. I guess we have 2 of them tonight that we could talk for the next 3 hours on whether we should excuse them. If you ladies would like to have something further to talk about.
I just know that I'm going to have a hard time excusing Bruce Bassett. I looked at the weather at the Caribous. There's been new snow since Thursday every single day, and a base of like 170 or 80 inches, and I'm sure he's getting lots of powder skiing in. I'm totally jealous.
If you want to speak to the motion, you'll have to wait till the motion's made, and then...
He sent an email earlier this morning, and I pictured it as he's going up a lift or something.
So I would entertain a motion to excuse the mayor and Councilmember Grady from their indolence.
I will move to excuse Councilmember Grady and Bassett from tonight's meeting.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Opposed? None. Motion carries 5-0. Planning schedule. This. Rich, I don't.
Well, we've added. What did I add here? The safe road practices to our list of items for the mini planning session that came from tonight. I'm going to still need to do some changes. The town center items will probably have to move off of June 4th. I've moved the second reading for that all the way to September because of it's getting difficult. The meetings are filling up. I may move all that town center stuff to even the first and second reading to just later, the third quarter or fourth quarter, just for meeting management purposes. So I'm not suggesting any other changes right now. Don't write anything down, but when we get to May 16th, this will probably look a little bit different. The one thing I do want to mention, the animal control update will come April 16th. I know you've received a few emails from individuals on the island that are connected one way or another to the Humane Society. You are being lobbied, and that's okay. We're at a decision point, or soon to be at decision point, between re-upping our animal control contract with King County, or as an alternative, sign a contract with a group of Eastside cities that will run its own animal control service. We were here 2 years ago, and we're back. It's a very challenging issue. So just keep an eye on those emails. Don't need to do anything with them. We will have an update on April 16th, and then ultimately you will need to make a decision about which path to take, I think at the April 7th meeting. It'll be a two-step process.
I kind of have a question about...
May 7th, I'm sorry.
Mr. City Manager, I kind of have a question about those emails, and it's kind of a different subject, but were those emails forwarded to staff by a council member, or was that from our mailbox that's reviewed by staff and then taken? I'm pretty sure those were all sent to your council mailbox. I mean, we have a mail account that is for council members, which Ally controls. She gets them, and as soon as she gets them, she forwards them on to the council itself. Well, no, there are two different mailboxes.
Individually
There's two different mailboxes. There's a mailbox that gets reviewed by the staff, and then there's another mailbox that goes directly to council without review of staff.
If they're individually addressed to you, they go directly.
That's not my understanding.
Well,
actually, would you look at that, and if it's the council's desire, that give us a report on the two council emails and the disposition of those emails, right, i.e. whether one gets reviewed by the staff, then forwarded, or it goes directly to the council without review.
That's something we can definitely, it's a very simple answer.
Great.
Ally can, I don't know if Tammy knows it off the top of her head.
I think there's just one that staff reviews, but I'm checking with Ally right now.
Okay.
Let's not try and solve it tonight, because I
Sure.
promise you it'll be a half-an-hour conversation. We'll look at it and...
Yep, bring it back to the council. Thanks.
Rich, one other thing on the schedule. I can't remember. On the communications coordinator, do you have to come back to the council on that, or do you have to put that on the agenda, or do you have enough authority now, or what?
I have enough authority to go forward, and I am.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, fine.
Chip's got a funding source now, and I've got a plan, and so I will go forward. It'll still... I'm going to be deliberate about this. I'm not going to just race off and do something, but I've got a plan.
Okay. Hannah?
So it'll come off of this, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I may report it.
Okay.
I have a few planning questions. On the April 16th agenda, weren't we going to move the pool to the further date, given the school bond vote the next day?
Well, last time you and I talked about it, the answer was yes, and then I talked to Gary Plano, and we both agreed this is fine, because all we're going to do, and all he is choosing to do, is extend the existing agreement 1 year so that he can have their pool operator, OCA, continue to operate another year without any other commitments for the long term. And that way he'll find out what the results of the bond is, and it's just going to be status quo for another 12 months.
Okay, great. Also, in the design proposal for the fire station, there's, under assumptions, there's a point that says the city recognizes that the current residential zoning of the site is an issue that needs to be addressed. And just wanted to make sure, is that something that needs to be on the planning schedule?
Well, it actually...
I thought we
may already be on here, but it's a different issue. It's this issue of the P zone that's island-wide, and it's probably more impactful on the schools than it is the fire station. So, yes, that is on our plate for this year.
But is that a planning commission item before it gets to the council?
Yes. It'll need to go to the planning commission and then to the council. We will write new zoning regulations for P zone land.
Right.
So just want to make sure that we, since it
account for it
requires
on
a
the
number of
Yep.
public meetings, that. I guess my last thing is that I'm a bit concerned about pushing the town center issues all the way to September when we're dealing with a near empty.
Why don't we do this with Bruce, and I will sit down with Rich and just talk the schedule through at one of our meetings. So I understand your point, and let Bruce and I work that out with Rich. Okay. Are there any other, are there anything else on the planning schedule? I should have also asked if there's any other council member absences other than those listed on page 4 that people know about?
Not that I know about.
Okay. Okay, board appointments. I have a few I haven't told Rich about. No.
Here it comes.
No board appointments tonight. Bruce doesn't give me any power whatsoever. Council member reports. Mike?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple things. Went to the I-90 ribbon-cutting ceremony to give access to the eastbound I-90 HOV on the general purpose lanes.
Pretty balmy weather.
It was very balmy, but we live in Seattle. We should expect nothing less.
It was...
We should expect nothing less.
Noah was just about to come floating. It was wet.
So I'm going to ask I suspect, I've asked staff, the city manager, about researching, indeed, Islanders' access to that HOV lane on the SOV, and I think...
in the eastbound direction.
In the eastbound direction, and indications are that it's going to take more than the allotted 1 hour unless we get counsel.
Actually, I took the bull by the horns at that ribbon cutting, and I asked Deputy Transportation Secretary Dave Dye the very question, because he's been around this probably longer than I have, and he says he'll find the citation.
Oh, great. Okay.
And there's probably nobody better placed in the state than Dave.
Great. Thank you, Mr. City Manager.
I mean, it's interesting, Mike, because I remember when we talked about the amendment that we did a few years ago that I could not find anything in the agreement which covered that issue, because it seemed to me like reading the agreement itself, on its face, it would sound like we have access in both directions.
Yeah, and it isn't in the memorandum of agreement. I went through it several times myself. I know it exists. I don't remember where it is. I'm assuming it's in the original EIS, but it's in a document, and Dave Dye, again, is going to be the best person to pull it out.
I'll tell him not to look too hard.
Yeah.
The second thing is I attended it was right here at the community center, the King County Flood Control District advisory meeting. And it was an interesting meeting and a good meeting from the perspective of one of the few times when an organization didn't accept mission creep, to accept more than their original mission, and that is to provide flood infrastructure to our 4 major river basins. And there's a large push to enlarge those responsibilities to include coastal areas. And I was very satisfied or proud that the Flood Commission said, nope, we've got enough overdue projects with the projects of just handling the river basins, and that was good. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Jane?
At the ribbon cutting, I got chilled and my feet got wet, and it took me about 2 days to feel warm again. The Sustainability Task Force is off and running. We have our little groups and our assignments, and that is it's a very energetic, interesting group, and I think it's going to be very productive. And I think that's it.
Planning Commission did meet, I believe it was March 22nd, going back in my mind. We did review the work plan for the year. It was good. It was interesting. In particular, there was great interest, obviously, in the downtown question, and we will be planning a walkabout for the May 2nd meeting, I believe, and it will be in the public notice, so if anybody would like to come with us. No policy decisions, but clearly an opportunity for myself and the commission to educate ourselves as we go forward and look at that substantive issue. The other question that I would have, not recalling off the top of my head, is whether or not the zoning issue of the fire station, et cetera, is actually in the work calendar or not. I'm trying to mentally go through it, but if we could double-check that, I would very much appreciate it.
I've made the same mental note. I'm thinking of it not just fire station, but it's the whole P-zone issue does need to be on the work plan for this year. So I'll talk to Kirsten about it. You may have seen an email today about Tim. He's actually right now, he's not feeling well. So it sounds like he'll be all right, but he's in the hospital right now. So
oh my
Tim
goodness.
Stewart. I think he's going to be okay, but we'll.
Well, our best wishes.
Yeah,
and to he and his family. That's it from my side.
The only other thing I would add is that pursuant to the direction given at the planning session, Jane, Rich, and I did have an initial meeting with Youth Theater Northwest to talk about the future. It's very general, but at least so the council's aware that there's some discussions that are starting up, and as if and when they start getting more substantive, we will obviously come back to the council and fill the council in. Can't this go on all night? I'm just Can we just go to April? Can we go to the April 16th agenda?
Just can't get enough of it. Good stuff.
We got a good majority on it.
Yeah, do I need a motion to adjourn or no? Okay.
Since you haven't pounded yet, I would just, we talked around it a lot tonight, but I would just like to encourage Mercer Island residents to be sure to vote on the school bond before April 17th.
By the power vested in me, this meeting's adjourned.
Hey. Good job, Deputy Dan.